We introduced the concept of a LAN so that we can talk about routing at the link layer and use that to build other layers on top of it, the network layer, and so on. But because a LAN has certain properties, then certain responsibilities end up getting delegated to that concept. For example, network printers conventionally are accessible to any other machine on the same LAN. Presumably they're in the same office or the same floor or whatever, and so machines that can talk directly to the printer on the LAN should be able to print. But anytime you have a concept that starts getting used for a separate purpose, then you end up wanting to generalize that purpose and therefore generalizing the concept some way, and often we do that by virtualizing it. For example, maybe your LANs are per floor and your department grows to 2 floors, or it splits across building, but they should all have access to the same printers. Or the flip side of this is that you have 2 different departments on the same floor, but they have different resources. And so even though they're all connected to the same physical network, that is normally be the same LAN, you want to virtually say that one half of the floor is one department and the other half of the floor is another one. Like, suppose the CS department and a EE department are next to each other in a particular building and they share the same networking infrastructure, but they're supposed to have LAN allocated resources that are separate because they're separate departments. Then that network might be built by having a router that advertises itself to different of its connections as being different LANs. And so even though CS and EE, they're all connected to the same router here, the router might allocate half of its ports to one LAN and half of the ports as another LAN, which is not represented by different physical boxes, but virtual boxes built into that router. And let's suppose those 2 departments both grow and they both end up getting split across 2 different buildings, and yet those departments still have resources that should be shared across the buildings. To get packets from one building to the other, we might need to go all the way to the internet layer and scale up through routers. But now we can have these 2 different routers, 2 different ends of the routers, claim to be the same LAN to machines on that network in one building MEB and another building WEB. So whereas these machines think they're talking on some LAN, and it's all just one wire between these machines, but that's actually implemented by tunneling link layer frames through network layer packets. That is, there is a virtual switch that is implemented by taking frames for that switch, turning them into packets, routing them to the appropriate other router, taking them back out, pretending that they're from the same switch here on the actual wires connecting these machines. Meanwhile, this router with tunneling can still have 2 different virtual LANs that it's serving because as it tunnels, as it encodes those frames in packets, it can keep track of which virtual LAN those frames inside the packets belong to.